Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, you'll meet a crime scene investigator who spent more than 40 years in law enforcement, and he's worked on some of the biggest cases in Texas. His incredible journey just ahead.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, during my career in TV news, I covered some big cases, and I just happened to cover a couple of cases that my next guest covered as well. But he was on the other side. I'm covering it as a news reporter. He's covering it as a crime scene investigator. Daniel Rhodes is in the studio. More than 40 years in law enforcement. Thank you for coming on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, the two that come to mind for me are Ashley Estelle and Amber Hagerman, and you worked on both of those.
Yes.
So what is it like to have that pressure on you? Because I remember in both of those cases, there was a tremendous amount of pressure from the public and the media.
Yes. I guess Ashley was my first really high-profile case, homicide-wise. We were fortunate enough that we made an arrest within approximately about a week after that offense had occurred. So that kind of took a little bit of the pressure off.
Sure.
But still, when you're processing a crime scene, you always want to make sure when you're processing, most important thing is that you're doing it legally. You know, we don't want to go to a scene, process it without a search warrant or consent to search, whatever we need paperwork-wise to do that. If we would do that, that evidence could possibly be inadmissible if we ever made an arrest.
Sure.
So that was something. One of the things I've always been, I guess, pretty hard on myself is after working almost any kind of a offense, I'll go home and sit about and think about, is there something I missed?
Yes.
Is there something I failed to collect? Things like that. So you, this line of work, you just really have to do your best shot and do the best you can with your skill set, the information that you have at that time. And then a lot of it's just up to, just getting good luck or good breaks for the detective. So they're able to make an identification, and hopefully we have physical evidence that will help link that offense to that suspect so they can make an arrest.
And we mentioned Amber Hagerman.
Yes.
Really one of the biggest cases in Texas history because of the Amber Alert.
Exactly. Yes. I actually was on duty when Amber was actually kidnapped. That was my last day on evening shift. We had 2 days off, came in on midnight shift, and my second night on midnights when we found her body. So I actually worked her kidnapping and also the body recovery of Amber's. And that was a really big case also, same as in Plano. It really scared the community.
Sure.
It was anytime a child's abducted and killed, it's hard for the police. There's a lot of internal pressure on us to try to solve those cases as fast as possible, just to get that predator off the street and try to make the community that much safer.
Sure. How many years with the city of Arlington? How many years did you spend?
I did a little over 23 years with Arlington and just shy of 7 at Plano. So I had 30 full-time years working between those two agencies doing crime scene investigations.
And they did a little tribute to you on social media when you retired from Arlington in 2018. We've got some pictures. Let's go ahead and put those on the screen and talk about that. Was that kind of a bittersweet day?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I have to imagine. And there you are, looking for fingerprints?
Yes.
That's awesome. And what was that citation?
That was from the Hispanic Citizens Police Academy, because I'd been an instructor for them for many, many years. Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, I used to teach in the police academy. I've taught at multiple police academies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then at Arlington at the time, we had an adult citizen police academy. We had a Hispanic citizen police academy. We had a high school class citizen police academy, and we also had one for clergy and pastors that I would speak at every year. And of course, I did multiple speaking engagements at high schools, colleges, career days, and events like that.
Well, we should point out that he's not fully retired. In fact, he didn't hang up his badge. He's probably busier now than ever before. You're currently with the city of Oak Ridge, which is in Kaufman County.
Correct.
And you do crime scene work there. And you have a very successful consulting firm. It's called DFR Consulting and Training.
Yes.
Talk about the work you do in your consulting firm.
The main thing that we do at the consulting firm is we're teaching what's called intermediate crime scene investigation classes. They're typically 40 hours long, so it's a week long. A lot of instructors don't have the time to teach a full week class. So with my company, I have myself and I have 2 other officers who teach certain parts of the curriculum that we need to have, where they're more subject matter experts in those things than I am. So plus, if you're teaching a 40-hour class, it's hard for officers to sit and listen to the same person talking to them for a week long. So if you have 2 or 3 other people to help you where they're subject matter experts, that gives me a break. That makes it easier on the students so they don't have to listen to me talk the entire time also.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we've got some video from our library of crime scene investigation, and I want to ask you, the media obviously shapes people's images of crime scene investigators, CSI, and everybody assumes that you can solve a case in an hour.
I wish we could solve it in an hour.
So what are some of the things that the misconceptions people have about crime scene investigators?
Well, it's not like a lot of the CSI TV shows it would be on, where literally you could come in and possibly place a fingerprint in the system. Now, fingerprints we can identify fairly quickly if the department has what they call an AFIS system, and that's an automated fingerprint identification system. And what we can do is we collect crime scene latents on a crime scene. We can take those back to the station, enter those into the database, and the one that Arlington has, it will actually search the local database first. If it doesn't make a match, it'll search the state database. Doesn't make a match there, then enter it to the FBI database. So they have the capabilities to search a latent in all 3 systems and see if we can identify that. The biggest thing is DNA. You might collect DNA swabs or blood samples on a call. Typically, the time you send that off to the lab, you're looking at maybe a 6 to 8 week return time on what you've processed and what the results are. So we may have a possible suspect, their DNA. It might take, like I said, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months to get that identified, so that the detectives could make get an arrest warrant for them.
What does it feel like to have a match? Like you've been working on this case, you put in countless hours, and then suddenly we have a match.
Yeah, it's I know fingerprint-wise, anytime I went to scene and had good fingerprints, I would try to get those entered in the database as quick as I could, or if I couldn't do it, I'd hand it off to one of the latent fingerprint examiners. But it was a rush. Every time you got a hit, because when I first started in crime scene investigations in '88, we didn't have AFIS or anything like that. So the way we made matches back at that time was either an officer had to have a lead on a person, or a detective would have said, "Hey, check, Joe Smith. He just got out of prison. He's doing these kind of offenses." We would pull their fingerprint card, then pull the latents from the crime scenes and try to identify those. With AFIS, when we had it, literally we could take that fingerprint with maybe an hour after working a crime scene, come back, enter that into the database, and boom, we've got somebody possibly identified as a suspect.
And I mentioned,
so that was a very good, because that helped us catch a lot of our offenders much quicker and hopefully stop them from reoffending.
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned that Daniel's worked on some really big cases. In fact, they write books about some of your cases. I want to ask you to hold these up and tell us what each of these books are.
This was actually called Journey into Darkness, and there's a small article in here, part of it, regarding the Amber Hagerman kidnapping and murder. And in the photo section, there's a photo with her and her younger brother. This was taken at Christmas time, and she was kidnapped mid-January. I believe it was the 13th. We found her, I think, the 17th. So this may be one of the last photos of her actually alive. Wow. Possibly, I don't know, but it's very possible. And then actually on that last photo is actually the wanted poster where we gave information out to the community, trying to get leads and stuff like that for our detectives to see if we could identify who committed this offense.
Absolutely. And this book here?
Okay. This one is Mail Order Murder. And this was a gentleman that was actually my first day at Arlington. They arrested this gentleman. So my second and third days, I was with my trainer and another CSI and a couple of the homicide detectives, and we executed the search warrant at this man's residence. and we were out there pretty much 2 full days, probably about 16-hour days, processing the house. He had multiple vehicles, a trailer, and on this offense, the wife had been missing for, I'm guessing, maybe 5 or 6 months. Gotten leads from her friends that if she ever came up missing, there was a chance the husband had killed her. Once we had processed the scene, he'd been involved in a incident where a previous wife had been murdered. I believe it was in Copperas Cove, Texas, and they had ruled that a suicide. 15, 20 years prior to that, he had shot her in the chest with a shotgun after she was dead. She was on a bed. He actually put the shotgun up by her foot, cut her toe, and put the shotgun there to make it look like she was able to fire that weapon using her toe.
Wow.
We had the body exhumed, and then that's where they did a full autopsy on her and realized that it was a homicide shot. There's no way the angle of the projectiles that went to the body could have gone from the angle the way he staged it after he'd killed her.
Wow.
So
You brought some other things. Let's see. Okay. Well, yeah. Why don't we do this?
This is a sample or example of what a shell casing would look like. Many of the offenses that crime scene investigators go to are shooting calls. Very, very common. We'll go to shooting calls. This is what a much larger version of what a shell casing would look like, and pretty much anytime somebody has fired a weapon, there'll be what we call a firing pin impression on the bottom or the base of that. That firing pin impression is unique to that individual weapon. So if we recover shell casings at a crime scene, if we can recover a weapon, we can do test fires, have that sent to the ballistic lab, to have them identify and say this is the same weapon that was involved in you shooting that weapon, that gun with that weapon. This would be an example of what a projectile would look like, and this is actually when the weapon's fired. This will be what will come out the barrel of the gun. It'll spin. As it's spinning, it'll put what they call lancing grooves onto the lead that comes out the barrel of the gun, and that's actually what's going to shoot the person if they get hit. Those also will be unique to that weapon. Each weapon will have lancing grooves in it. And this would be what the inside of the cutout of like what a barrel of a weapon would look like. So that said, that would have the lancing grooves. So if we can recover the shell casings, projectiles from the scene, and if we get that weapon to check against, there's a very good probability we can try to link that weapon to that offense and to actually other offenses also.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm going to ask you to hold this up. What are we looking at here?
This is actually a shoe. The young man involved in this offense had murdered his parents. He had actually, after that, he'd washed his shoes a couple different times trying to get the blood evidence out of those. The shoes were collected, and they were sprayed with a substance called luminol. And what that is, it will react to the proteins in the blood, and then when you turn the lights off, it will actually glow in the dark. It luminesces so you can actually see that. So this was the photos of the shoes in the lab after they had been processed with the luminol. And then they were photographed. Then they were sent in for analysis to extract the blood from that, and it was able for that department to help make the link to that young man killing his parents.
And this.
Okay, and this is actually from an aggravated robbery I'd worked in Arlington, and the suspect had left a note at the scene, and I'd collected that as evidence from the crime scene, took it back to the lab at Arlington PD, and a lot of times we'll process paper products or wooden products, or say if you have a house that's got like a sheetrock wall, it's called luminol, and it's going to react to the fatties and amino acids in the hand. You'll process that. It takes usually about 24 hours, sometimes 36 to 48 hours to develop on the surface. Once it develops, if it's an item like this, we would just scan it in the computer. If it's in a scene, we'd actually just take photographs of that item in place and collect that. I've worked murder cases where we had processed the walls with the luminol, with the anhydrous. Latent fingerprints were developed, so we'd have to actually go back like a day or two later, photograph those, and actually cut those pieces of sheetrock out of the wall to take back to the lab. So that's one of those things, if you ever see where a crime scene department's at a scene maybe 3 or 4 days, there's a very good chance they're doing some kind of processing like that where they have to process it. It may take a day or two for those latents to develop at that scene for them to be able to recover that. So that's a reason a lot of times people think, what are the police doing here so long? They should be done by now. Right. But there could be a lot of stuff going on inside that scene that's just very time consuming to do that, to process, to get the evidence that you need.
Sure. 2 more items. Go ahead and pick up the stamps.
Okay. This is actually stamps that were made, and this was after the Amber Alert was signed into law. As far as I know, that's the only stamp made from a crime scene in the nation. Now, there may have been another. I've never seen or heard anything about that. So that was very interesting. That's something that's probably not going to happen on too many crime scenes ever again. Sure. So I was fortunate enough to be involved in that offense.
And the book.
And then lastly, this was a book actually was written by Ashley Estelle, and she was our little girl that was kidnapped and murdered in Plano in September of '93. And actually, she had gone to Carpenter Park. Her brother was in a soccer tournament. The family saw her. She went to play at the playground. They looked for her within a minute or two, and she was gone. So she had been, pretty much abducted in broad daylight. It was years later, found out where she had written a book while she was in first grade. And the family, I guess, gave the information to this person that wrote the book, and then they actually published the book, sold these, and all the proceeds went to help Collin County with their victims assistance unit. So I thought that was really wonderful. Sure. That something like that happened, that they were able to, plus it's a great memorial of her also.
Absolutely.
So that's something I've never heard of a child ever writing a book that was murdered, and then that book was ever published after that. So
Sure.
I said it may have happened sometime before, but I've never heard of that.
Well, I think it must be so rewarding for you to get justice for families. And I think you were telling me before the show, you've sent people to death row. You've helped get laws passed.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about some of the laws that you helped to get passed?
Okay. So far here in Texas, I've worked 4 cases where state and or federal laws have been passed because of those offenses. The first one was Ashley Estelle's kidnapping from Plano. After that happened, they had Ashley's laws made, which made it harder sentencing for sex offenders, especially of children, but any sex offender per se. So that was the first one that was passed. I worked the Amber Hagerman kidnapping and murder in Arlington. It was within a year or two. They did not only the Amber Alert, where was any time a child's abducted or missing, or not always missing, but abducted typically, or a dangerous situation, they'll do an Amber Alert. Of course, that's now on TV, radio, on our phones. It comes through. Last I heard, I believe there's been like 1,000 children. I think they've been saved since that law has gone into effect, which is very nice that they've saved some kids.
Sure.
They've also it was approximately about a week after we had Amber's kidnapping murder. We actually had a small newborn baby dumped in the exact same apartment complex where we had found her body. She was placed in a garbage bag. It was cold because it was been mid-late January at the time. And a young man was outside smoking. He heard what he thought was a cat meowing loud. He went and got his mom, and she walked out. She goes, "That's a baby." So they started looking around. Of course, they called 911. Patrol officers got there within a few moments and found the baby actually in a garbage bag. And they were able to rescue her, got her to the hospital, so she survived. So they did after that, they did a baby Moses law here in Texas. And that's where, say, if somebody has a child and they don't want to give them up, instead of throwing them away in a dumpster, take them to a fire station or a police station or a hospital. And pretty much about the only thing they'll ask of the people dropping off the child is if the baby has any kind of medical conditions that they need to be aware of, so they can take the best care of that child at that point in time. And then the other one I worked was a sexual assault call where we collected DNA from the crime scene, and the statute of limitations was getting close to being expired, and Arlington did the first law in the state of Texas. It's called a John Doe warrant on the DNA. So that even though we did not have anybody identified at that point in time, they were able to get that law passed. So that way we were able to enter that search, that arrest warrant, into the database. And then within a few years, we actually identified that gentleman. He was actually a serial rapist that was hitting Tarrant County, and I believe it was one of the other counties over there. But I think he cleared, 9 or 10 sexual assaults He worked at one of the hospitals in Fort Worth. I know when they arrested him, they did a search warrant, I guess, in his locker, and he'd actually collected what we refer to as trophies from a lot of his victims. He'd sometimes steal like their credit card or a driver's license, or sometimes they'll steal clothing and stuff like that. So that's a great link for a detective. If you make an arrest and you've got, the suspect has stuff that belonged to the victims from your assaults or they've been murdered. So that's really good physical evidence to help link those scenes with that victim.
Well, Daniel, you're still a young man. You got a lot of crimes to solve, but even if your career ended today, you have to look back on the last 40 years with great pride.
Yes.
What does it feel like to have worked on so many big cases and brought justice to so many families?
Well, I've been very fortunate to work on many cases. I guess the way I looked at it was I always thought, for the grace of God, this could be my friends or my family members. So I tried to work, as well as I could. And a lot of it's just luck. I mean, you can process a crime scene, and you hear about it all the time, where they're solving murders from 30 or 40 years ago. So of course, I've worked murders that we've never solved, as far as I know. So I still have hope that even stuff we may have collected years ago, hopefully the detectives will get a lead somewhere down the road. Somebody might they might brag about it, or could link them to another offense, or you just never know. So there's still hope, even stuff that we've never solved, somewhere in the future. Hopefully we will. Get that break. For the detectives to make that case.
Well, I just appreciate you sharing your heart with us, and clearly this is a life well lived. Thank you so much. We're going to end with his LinkedIn page if you'd like to get a hold of him. There it is on your screen. The great Daniel Rhodes. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You bet.
You're wonderful.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.
You.